right, so we've got if sine theta equals 720 over 25, then tangent is what? Right? And you have A, B, C, and D, and of course, in here, we always have that elusive E that, you know, if there's not an A, B, C, D, then you got to write in E. Okay? So, it's all about confidence, knowing your math. Okay? So the first thing we got to do is remember SOHCAHTOA. Okay? So have we learned SOHCAHTOA? No? So now it's time. Alright, so here we go. SOHCAHTOA. Alright? So this is the key. Now we did 30, 60, 90 triangles for all of chapter 7. Now this is a 90-degree triangle. It's the only thing that SOHCAHTOA works for. So it must be right for you to use SOHCAHTOA. Okay? Alright, so what does this mean? So, and I write it different than you'll see it in books. And the reason, my daughter looked at me and she's like, why do you write it like that, Dad? And I'm like, because this is a fraction. That's the whole point to SOHCAHTOA. Is that the sine of theta, right, is equal to the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Okay? So what does that mean? Okay? And what that means is if we have a triangle, a right triangle, okay, we know that the side opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse. Okay? We know that. Okay? And we know that these are sides. But what we haven't learned yet is like which one's opposite, which one's adjacent, right? Well, we do know what adjacent means, right? It means next to. We've been working with adjacent all year long, right? So opposite and adjacent. So, like an adjacent angle is the angle next to another angle, okay? Well, the adjacent angle is the adjacent side is the side next to the angle you're talking about, okay? So, if I'm talking about theta, or if I'm talking about, let's go with phi, okay? So these are two very common Greek letters that you're going to see used for angles. It's called phi, okay? It looks like that. And it's called theta. And it looks like this. Okay? Now, depending on which one we're talking about, it's all relative to that angle. Okay? The hypotenuse is always the hypotenuse. But the side opposite of the angle depends on what angle you're looking at. Does that make sense? So if I'm looking from this side, alright, if I'm looking from this side, then that's opposite. Does that make sense? But if I'm looking from phi, the opposite side is down here. See how it's different? Okay? So it's relative to the angle that you're looking from. Okay? The side touching theta is a hypotenuse, right? Hypotenuse is the hypotenuse. So the adjacent side is the other side that touches theta, not the hypotenuse side. Okay? So that means that this is opposite, this is adjacent. Okay? And so once I know what's opposite, what's adjacent, and what's hypotenuse, sine, cosine, so remember this is sine, it's pronounced sine, okay? This is cosine, and this is tangent. Okay, but the way you'll see them in a calculator is sin. So a lot of my students are like, oh, you mean sin? You know, I'm like, yeah, sin, okay. And cos, okay, because you're going to see it in the calculator as COS. Okay, so cosine theta is equal to adjacent, A, adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay? Alright? And then TOA. TOA. So, ca, TOA lets me know that O is over A. Okay? So opposite over adjacent. So tangent, the way you'll see that in your calculator is tan. Alright? So TAN. And that's opposite over adjacent. Okay? Alright, so once I know these, it's all relative to the angle, right? So the angle opposite, or the side opposite of the angle, is 7. Right? Which was the hypotenuse? Is it 24? No, it's the unknown, right? It's the one we don't know. It's the one that's opposite of the right angle. The hypotenuse is always the longest side, right? Alright? And then there's the adjacent. Okay? So once we know all that, now we can do this problem. If the sine of theta is 7 over 25, well, what's sine? So, right? So is O over H, right? So sine theta is equal to O over H. So that means this is opposite, and this is the hypotenuse. Well, if that's the hypotenuse, then that would be 25, right? And this is that Pythagorean triple. Remember we talked about 3, 4, 5 triangles, right? Have we talked about that yet? So there's what we call when we did the Pythagorean theorem, I talked about Pythagorean triples. I know you're looking at me like, what? So Pythagorean triples that you should have in your notes. Okay? The most popular one, 3, 4, 5. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 9 plus 16 equals 25. Okay? The other ones are 5, 12, 13. The other one would be 7, 24, 25. Look familiar? 7, 24, 25, right? Another one would be 8, 15, 17. Okay? And these are very popular. And you can look up Google Pythagorean triples. It'll give you a list. Okay? If you remember these, it'll be very helpful when you do that a squared plus b squared equals c squared on the state test. Okay? Now, once we know that this is opposite, hypotenuse, adjacent, okay, then we look at tangent. What's tangent?
Opposite over adjacent.
Opposite over adjacent. Okay? So what's the opposite side? 7. What's the adjacent side? 24. So tangent of theta equals the ratio of 7 over 24. So which one's that?
B.
B. Alright. So that's our winner. Winner. Okay? And that's it. Questions on SOHCAHTOA? Okay?
So it's meant for one side.
Now we went pretty quick on this